has drilled into an active plate fault. By setting up a monitoring station directly in the fault zone, seismologists hope to learn whether or not earthquake prediction is possible. Yet to scientists, one thing is very clear.
We know those events are going to happen. It's just a matter of when.
True believers in the seven signs see a far more powerful force being unleashed.
I'm not sure if those scientific explanations are necessary. If God just decides to cause an earthquake, He can just make that happen.
We now know what causes earthquakes, and we know that they will continue to occur. What would have to happen today for an earthquake to be seen as a sign from God? To fulfill that prophecy, it would have to be a massive series of global quakes, striking cities along every fault line. San Francisco, Tokyo, Shanghai, Athens, Istanbul. The list would include cities in the U.S., especially those near the San Andreas Fault.
It runs from the southern end of the state all the way through the urbanized regions of Los Angeles and up through San Francisco into Northern California.
Alina Dorian has spent much of her career planning for that dark day.
The worst time for an earthquake to hit would be when you have the most population out in places where it's the highest risk, which means in high-rise buildings, roadways, having the kids in school so they're all separated from their families.
It would be a tremendously violent event. The ground could move by 10, 20 feet. It would be shaking strong enough that people would be literally thrown to the ground. They couldn't stand. And if you were next to tall buildings, windows falling out of tall buildings would be a tremendous hazard.
Anything that falls from a significant height is basically just like a stray bullet. Now add to that glass, which is in those large structures tempered and made to withstand significant wind. It's basically falling blades. So the amount of trauma that those things would cause would be enormous.
Many of the older brick buildings would collapse. The older concrete frame buildings would collapse outright. You'd see some floor slabs that were just pancakes with people stuck in between them.
You're going to get amputations, pneumothorax, which are collapsed lungs, crushed hearts. If you're bleeding out and you can't get to the hospital, you will die.
Even people in LA's modern steel-frame skyscrapers, the kind that are designed to withstand large quakes, aren't totally safe.
At the very least, the building would begin to sway. For such a large earthquake, we'd anticipate that we'd see collapses of some of those buildings as well.
In a few minutes, the shaking will be over. But for those who survive the initial blow, the horror is just beginning. Fires caused by broken gas lines and fallen high-voltage wires will spread throughout the city.
If you start enough fires simultaneously, you'll overwhelm the resources to put it out, and instead of slowly putting the fire out, the fire will start to grow. And of course, if fires get large enough and they just keep growing, that's what we call a conflagration.
With water mains and roadways severed, a post-quake firestorm in LA could last for days, even weeks. Thousands of people trapped in collapsed buildings or too badly injured to move will be incinerated. Eventually, even a fire this size will burn itself out, but the community will continue to suffer.
It's not just the deaths. Deaths are huge. But then you have 6 months, a year, 2 years of recovery time for everyone else. And not just people that are sick, but people that are displaced, people that don't have homes, they don't have jobs anymore, they don't have possessions, they don't, their families have been ripped apart. Imagine afterwards trying to get your life back together again as an individual, as a system, as a business. I mean, it has huge ramifications.
And this is just one city, in one country, in the entire world. Imagine the consequences of a simultaneous global quake in poorer areas around the globe.
Those buildings can't survive. Those people have nowhere to go, and they are packed. There's so many people in a little square meter. So it's something that you have to think about.
catastrophe on a biblical scale.
Earthquakes are a warning. They have taken place throughout human history, and they are an indication that God is still in control of Earth.
The next sign centers on a disaster that's less familiar, but could be even more catastrophic. Death from above, caused by one of the most powerful forces in the universe.